The girl noticed that the maid in the house was about to go downstairs. As soon as she reached the staircase, the girl suddenly rushed out from behind. It did not take long for the family to discover what had happened, but Ursula could not say a single word to explain herself. Later, the family decided to take her to see a psychologist. Unexpectedly, just as they set out, they were killed in a car accident, and Ursula was reborn from her mother's womb. In this life, she once again pushed the maid down the stairs, but on the way to the psychologist, she instinctively bent down to pick up a glove from the ground. Because of those few seconds of delay, she avoided the accident and made it to the psychologist. After several sessions, Ursula finally explained the reason. She said that she seemed to be able to be reborn, and often dreamed of the moment of death from her previous life. At that time, she and her younger brother had been infected by a virus and died painfully in bed, and it was that very maid who had brought the virus back. To prevent all of this, she chose to push the maid down the stairs after being reborn, but when the doctor asked for more details, Ursula could not answer. She did not seem to have complete memories of her past life, but vaguely remembered that it would snow heavily before every death. The doctor suspected that her anxiety had caused confusion in her memory. After several courses of treatment, Ursula seemed to improve a great deal. Under her family's protection, she passed through her fragile childhood safely, but the obstacles on her path to growing up were far more than just accidents. When she turned 16, her older brother, who was studying away at university, brought two friends home, with a budding curiosity about the opposite sex. Ursula paid special attention to one of them. When they happened to meet in the garden, she would even take the initiative to greet him, but he clearly had no impression of her.
How old are you?
16. It's my birthday. You ate cake?
You're shivering.
It's freezing out here.
I can warm you up.
His approach was rough and completely unexpected. She did not know how to react, and could only stand there in fear, unable to resist. It was not until her brother's call interrupted them. He casually patted her and walked away with a smile. As if nothing had happened, Ursula was left frozen in place, as though she were the one who had done something wrong. She did not dare to speak out, and beyond the discomfort, what hurt even more was the shame she felt at the thought of exposing it, so she could only romanticize it in her mind as a vague kind of love. But that was not how he saw it, perhaps realizing that Ursula did not know how to refuse. The next time they met, he stopped her and once again forced himself close without hesitation. The next second, he unfastened his belt. She was violated. It happened right in the small staircase of her own home, with her parents just on the other side of the wall. Yet the harm still found its way in without obstruction. He adjusted his clothes and left shamelessly. To him, it was nothing more than a moment of thrill, something that required no consequence. It took Ursula a long time to try to numb the pain and forget, but during those days, her belly began to swell more and more. It was not until her mother pointed out that she seemed to be gaining weight that Ursula realized something was wrong. After frantically searching through books, Ursula finally confirmed that she was pregnant. That day, she was engulfed by an overwhelming chill and could not stop trembling. Tomorrow continued to arrive, but her life had already fallen into an icy abyss. At that point, she even thought about ending everything. She planned to rush out in front of a speeding train to end her life, but fate seemed to be playing another cruel joke on her. The train slowed down in front of her, but at the same time, it offered her another path.
This is the London train.
She remembered that when she was young, she had gone to London for psychological treatment and stayed with her aunt for a while. Her aunt was open-minded and carried none of the rigid authority of an elder, perhaps someone she could confide in and seek help from, just as Ursula had hoped. Her aunt accepted her and even helped her lie to the family. Seeing her lower her head in tears, her aunt did not blame her, but instead comforted her with compassion. Her aunt arranged for an abortion for her. At that time, abortion was not legal and could only be performed in underground clinics. She was told to remove her shoes and socks, and then a male doctor walked in. She tried to suppress her fear, wanting to know what she was about to face.
Having an operation. But I'm not ill.
But no one answered her. She was shackled at the ankles, fitted with an anesthesia mask, and then lost consciousness. After the procedure, her aunt took her home to recover. The intense pain left her constantly drowsy. In those hazy dreams, she would always see fragments of the past, but she had no way to go back, and the road ahead was far beyond what she could bear. Her recovery went terribly wrong, and the infection caused days of high fever and fainting. As the situation spiraled out of control, her aunt had no choice but to contact Ursula's parents. They rushed her to the hospital, and only then was her life saved. But in this world, there are punishments far heavier than death.
could you?
At this point, she no longer had the courage to tell her parents the truth. She could only silently let regret consume her until she could no longer breathe. Never before had she so desperately longed for death. Unfortunately, the imagined snowfall did not take her away, but that bright young girl was buried forever on that night. Later, Ursula decided to drop out of school, leave her hometown, and try her luck in another city. She arrived alone in a strange place, moved into a rundown apartment, and enrolled in a typing course. She believed with all her heart that she could start over, but the malice lurking in the shadows once again targeted her gentle and reserved nature. In class, she followed the teacher's instructions and practiced typing blindfolded. Yet somehow, beyond the sound of typing, she heard heavy, hurried breathing. She slowly realized what it was, but she did not dare to remove the blindfold, nor did she dare to speak out. She could only pretend in panic that nothing had happened. After that day, she never returned to class, instead hiding in her room and gradually turning to alcohol. It seemed that only in the numbness of alcohol could she forget the disgust of her experiences and briefly feel like herself again. But in that haze of intoxication, she grew weaker and more vulnerable, giving others an opportunity. On a miserable rainy day, she met a man. He helped Ursula up and even picked up the things she had dropped. She had not felt kindness from a man in so long that with just one glance, she believed he was her salvation. After a few months of dating, they decided to get married. The wedding was quiet, attended only by Ursula's parents. There was no grand ceremony, and after a simple exchange of vows, it ended hastily. Her mother grew more worried the more she watched. Filled with hope, Ursula left with the man, believing this would mark the beginning of happiness. But on their wedding night, when she shyly smiled at him, something unknowingly triggered him. His movements were mechanical and cold, and Ursula felt not a trace of warmth or affection, yet she endured it out of habit. Later, the man moved her into a new house. He said he had bought it for her, and that the interior had been chosen by his mother. The style was dull and gloomy, and though she frowned, she forced herself to smile. She thought this was the kind of compromise required in marriage. So when the man casually assigned her household duties, she obeyed. He claimed that he had once published a book and made a large sum of money. Now he was writing a second one that would sell even better. When Ursula offered to help organize the manuscript, he refused. She nodded obediently and followed him back to the bedroom. There, he showed her what he called the most suitable place for her, an ironing board. At times, she felt more like a servant than a wife. She watched him leave for work each day, while she ironed clothes and cooked. One day, she could no longer endure it, and while out for some fresh air, she impulsively signed up for a tennis class. When the man returned home, she mentioned it. Without warning, he flew into a rage.
Didn't I tell you that I've already spent all of my money on you? I bought you an entire house.
She had never seen this side of him before, and along with fear, she felt confusion. How could someone who once seemed so gentle suddenly change so completely? In the empty room, she curled up alone to recover. Only after she fell asleep from exhaustion did the man return, as if he did not remember the earlier conflict at all. He woke her only to satisfy his own desires, as though she were nothing more than an unfeeling outlet. She closed her eyes and let the darkness swallow her. After seeing the true nature of the person beside her, every day of her future felt like a prison. She often broke down in tears while doing chores, or sat in the kitchen feeling herself wither away. She did not know when this kind of marriage would end, until one day, 2 bank debt collectors came to the door. They said the man owed a large sum of money and was now insolvent, and they had come to repossess the house. Ursula could not believe it, but forced herself to stay calm. She remembered what her husband had said about publishing books.
His last one did very well. I can talk to him about securing an advance of sales.
Only trouble was when we looked into it, it doesn't exist. It was never published.
Ursula froze. She rushed into the study and saw the so-called profound masterpiece he had mentioned. It was nothing more than a pile of useless papers and incoherent scribbles. Only then did she realize that from the very beginning, he had been a man built entirely on lies. Ursula had no time to feel fear or sorrow. She hurriedly packed her belongings, knowing she had to escape before he returned.
You're a liar!
He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into a darker place. When she regained consciousness, there was only silence around her. Struggling to her feet, she left without even taking her luggage. Staggering away with blood not yet dried, she had only one thought: to run. As she walked, she kept looking back. afraid that the monster would catch up with her. It was the longest road she had ever walked in her life. Only after boarding a departing train did she dare to breathe again. That was when she saw herself in the mirror, her eyes swollen shut, her nose bent to one side, and even a tooth had been knocked out. She did not dare to go home and could only follow her youthful instinct, fleeing to her aunt's house. Just like before, her aunt called a doctor for her and stayed patiently by her side. She even spent a large sum of money to fix her teeth. During her time at her aunt's house, she slowly pieced herself back together, especially when she saw that her aunt could live well on her own. She seemed to regain the courage to start over. One night, while Ursula was home alone, the doorbell rang. Standing outside was her younger brother Teddy, whom she had not seen for years. Teddy was only a few years younger than Ursula and had always been the gentlest child in the family. They had been very close since childhood. After so many years apart, she never imagined they would meet again under such circumstances. Only then did Ursula realize that her brother had grown so much. She also realized how far she had run back then, far enough to miss so much time with her family. They danced and laughed together again after so long, as if they had returned to their carefree youth, until another knock on the door interrupted them. The man had somehow tracked her down. He grabbed Ursula's hair tightly.
Who's been here with you? Who have you been fornicating with? Get.
After a heavy impact, she thought she heard the sound of bones breaking. Then came the noise of a struggle nearby. She could not move no matter how hard she tried, and could only whisper for her brother to run. Her vision slowly blurred, finally freezing on the snowflake in her palm. She knew her suffering had finally come to an end, but her life was cut short just as she had finally decided to move forward. As expected, she was reborn once again, but this time, more than any before, it felt like redemption. In this life, she still only had fragments of memory, and the cycle of life and death continued to haunt her. But perhaps the pain of her past had hardened into anger. When faced with violation, she no longer chose to endure, but to fight back. She drove the boy away. For the first time, she realized that when dealing with those who bluff and bully, the more you retreat, the more they advance. Only by confronting them can they be broken. So when another predator appeared, she tore off the blindfold called cowardice. She let all the girls see that ugly face clearly. She cast a look of disdain, then stood up firmly and opened the door. She dragged those lurking in the shadows into the light, forcing them to face judgment and scorn. Because of this courage, although her path in this life was still not easy, she managed to avoid many traps. Later, through her own efforts, she secured a job in a government department. In her spare time, she often returned home, playing with her mischievous nephews, arguing with her unruly brother, and feeling the warmth of her younger brother's affection. Watching her parents grow older, she had long forgotten how many times she had lived before, but for the warmth and peace she now had, everything she had gone through felt worthwhile. Yet even though she had avoided countless deadly dangers, some pain and regret could not be prevented by awareness or caution alone. Not long after the outbreak of World War II, her brother brought back news that Teddy had died on the front line, the family member who had always stepped forward to protect her. The boy who was as warm as the sun had fallen on the battlefield, leaving nothing behind. For the first time in all her cycles of life, she experienced the loss of someone so close. Her brother feared she would break down, but she could not cry.
Do you understand what I'm saying to you? We've lost him.
Well then, we'll find him.
She refused to believe that a living, breathing person could simply disappear like that. No matter what her brother said, Ursula only repeated this one sentence, and she believed she could make it true. From that day on, the wound stayed with her until she grew old and passed away with regret. From that moment, the purpose of her rebirth became singular, to mend this one regret and save her brother. But unfortunately, although she had the ability to be reborn, she did not retain complete memories of her past lives, only fragments and flashes of intuition. Before her brother enlisted, she felt a vague unease, yet when she tried to speak, she could not remember what she wanted to say. She could only watch his figure disappear into the night. Her brother went to the front line, while she remained in Britain as she had in her previous life. Enemy forces swept through like a swarm, and war spread to the city where Ursula lived. During an air raid, she and the nearby residents hid in an air raid shelter. They were strangers, forced to share the same fear. To comfort a woman holding a baby, Ursula even held the child for a while. In this life, she was just one of countless innocent civilians, having done nothing wrong and having no time to do anything at all. She seemed to dissolve like dust into the ruins. In the next life, she still could not remember when to save her brother, but guided by instinct, she became a rescue worker. Instead of being trapped in a bomb shelter, She moved through the chaos after the outbreak of war, saving the wounded. Looking at the injured civilians, she often found herself wondering if a slight twist of fate could have left her lying there instead, but she had no time to dwell on it. In times of war, surviving even one more day was a matter of luck. Yet in the end, humans are fragile and small, and how could anyone escape being crushed by the dust of an era? Later, Ursula still died in an air raid. She was reborn once again. Perhaps it was the painful memories of her past lives in Britain, or the faint persistence of her desire to save her brother. This time, she developed an inexplicable obsession with going to Germany. After meeting a German man, she settled there, married step by step, and gave birth to a daughter. When World War II broke out, she could neither return to her homeland nor stop her brother from going to the front line. When she received news of his death, she did not even have time to grieve. At that time, Germany, despite being the aggressor, was also in ruins. Ursula's husband died in an accident, leaving only her and her daughter to depend on each other. Under the dark skies and among shattered debris, they had long lost their home and struggled even to find food. Her daughter was so hungry she had no strength left, making escape impossible. Hearing that troops would soon arrive, Ursula took her daughter to a pharmacy and begged a soft-hearted doctor for 2 pills. She knew her frail daughter suffered every day, and once the army entered the city, what would happen to 2 defenseless women was something she could not bear to imagine. It would be better to release her from it all. Holding her daughter's hand, she walked into a quiet cluster of flowers. If she could not bring her daughter into a safe world, then at least at the end of her life, she could leave her with a trace of beauty. Ursula was reborn more and more times, yet the things she could change remained painfully few. Even worse, every time she chose a new path, it often led to an even more tragic outcome. She grew exhausted. When she lived again, her temperament became extremely fragile, like a string ready to snap at any moment. She no longer dared to try anything new, and instead followed the safest path, becoming a government employee. And so, in the same office, at the same moment, the news of her brother's death arrived once more. Though she had sensed it coming, she still completely broke down. She blamed herself entirely for her brother's death. She hated that she could not remember, hated that she had not stopped him sooner, and hated that she had no power to change any of it. With each cry of anguish, her belief collapsed. On a cool night, she climbed to the top of a building and jumped. Death became her only escape, carving the pain deep into her heart. Finally, in the next life, this obsession solidified completely, leading to the scene at the beginning. She did not dare forget her mission for even a moment, until she turned into a vengeful figure filled with resolve. But after that, she fell into emptiness once again. Would her brother truly escape his fate because of this? Would reality truly become better just because one evil leader was gone? She did not know. She only knew that a life lived for a single goal ultimately led to nothing but emptiness. By her 15th rebirth, Ursula finally tried to learn how to let go. At the crossroads where she parted from her brother, she watched his departing figure. Though she still had no memory of her past lives, she suddenly recalled a sentence she had never spoken across all those years.
Teddy, love you.
There were no miracles and no exceptions. Her brother still died. When she heard the news, she was calmer than ever before, her eyes shimmering with tears as she simply nodded. After her brother's death, Ursula returned home. That day was her father's birthday, and for the first time, she quietly stayed with her family despite her brother's absence. Her father had clearly aged, and her mother said she was tired and wanted to rest. She understood that they all shared the same sorrow, born from that seat that would forever remain empty. As she tasted that bitterness, she suddenly wondered if she alone was trapped in reliving life again and again. Her mother shook her head, saying she no longer wished to endure the pain of losing a child once more. When she asked her father, they began recalling childhood memories and soon found themselves laughing together. The sorrow quietly faded, replaced by a sense of peace. She realized that rebirth did not have to be about fixing or undoing. It could also be about reliving those beautiful moments. By her family's side, she once again felt what it meant to truly live in the present. In fact, in one of her past lives, Ursula had once heard a similar realization. At that time, she had collapsed after losing her brother. Her family, worried for her, took her back to the psychologist she had seen as a child. The doctor greeted her with a smile, still as kind as ever, but she knew that under the shadow of war, no one could truly smile anymore. She heard that the doctor's own son had also passed away. Ursula asked him how he managed to endure. At that time,
a love of fate. It means simple acceptance of what comes to us, regarding it as neither bad nor good.
She did not understand the depth of his answer. She stubbornly insisted on starting over, on changing everything. She resented the present, and in turn, resented herself. When she desperately looked back, every step of her past seemed like a mistake. But after living through 15 cycles, she finally stopped focusing on regret. Instead, she began to feel the present, to embrace her loved ones, to speak the love she had long buried, and to truly experience every breath around her. Even if the outcome was still painful, it was no longer unbearable. How to choose and how to accept are two questions that no one can escape in life. But no matter which path one takes, it will never be completely smooth. Even with clarity and courage, perfection is never possible. But just as the psychologist once said, love your fate. The past cannot be reclaimed. Only by seeing the present can one find the courage to move forward. Like Ursula, who finally turned to face the future, no matter whether there would be another rebirth or not. This time, she firmly embraced the life that belonged to her.